Lyra stood on the edge of the cliff, her massive frame silhouetted against the red-orange sky. The wind whipped around her strong enough to bend the tallest trees below, yet she held her ground as if rooted to the very rock. She looked across the jagged landscape, stretching as far as the eye could see. Beyond the cliffs lay the plains of Thalora, a land of both beauty and danger. In her society, she had been admired for her strength and intelligence. She could lift fallen trees that blocked the rivers, rebuild broken structures in a single day, and outthink nearly any strategist in her city. Yet, despite all her accomplishments, her life had been reduced to a single word: unfit. Too big, the elders had whispered. Too strong. She cannot bear children like us. Lyra remembered the council chamber vividly. The room had been tall, with ceilings painted to show the stars of her planet, but it had never looked more oppressive. Dozens of elders, sitting on carved stone chairs, had stared at her with cold eyes. They had spoken in formal tones, their words echoing with finality. "You are a marvel in skill and strength," one elder had said, his voice steady. "But the laws of our people are clear. Those who cannot reproduce as expected cannot remain among us. You are cast out." Lyra had felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had trained for years, endured harsh tests, and shown herself to be capable in ways that few could match. And yet the thing she could not change, her size, was enough to declare her unwanted. At first, she had refused to leave. She had argued, cried, and even offered to help in any other way. But the council was immovable. Finally, they had escorted her to the outskirts of the city, handing her a small pack of supplies and one last look of pity. Now, months later, Lyra wandered the empty plains, learning to survive alone. She had built a small shelter in the cliffs, reinforced with stones and strong vines from the surrounding forests. At night, she could hear the wind moan through the crevices, and she often imagined it carrying voices from the city she had lost. Sometimes she could almost hear the laughter of children she would never have. Lyra had grown stronger since her exile, but the loneliness weighed heavily. She often found herself speaking aloud, as if to an invisible companion. "I will survive," she would say. "I will prove them wrong. Even if they cannot see it, I will find a life worth living." Her days were spent hunting and foraging. She moved with a surprising grace for her size, stepping lightly over streams and leaping across rocky gaps with ease. She had learned the habits of the native animals, avoiding the predators that roamed the plains. Her keen eyes could spot a scuttling creature from half a mile away, and her ears could detect the slightest rustle in the grass. Yet survival alone was not enough. Lyra wanted connection, a bond that went deeper than respect for her abilities. She wanted to feel seen, not for what she could do, but for who she was. But in a world that had already rejected her, such hope seemed impossible. One morning, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Lyra noticed something strange. A trail of smoke rose in the distance, unusual in the empty plains. At first she thought it might be a fire started by the native hunters, a group of creatures that often hunted in packs. But the smoke moved differently, curling unnaturally as it rose. Curiosity, a feeling she rarely indulged, took hold. Lyra adjusted her pack and set off toward the smoke, moving with long, powerful strides that allowed her to cover ground quickly. As she drew closer, she saw the source, a human craft. Half buried in the rocky ground, its metal frame twisted and scorched. Lyra had heard of humans before, rare visitors from the stars who were smaller than her species. With fragile-looking bodies and incredible ingenuity, they were not common on Thalora, and encounters were almost unheard of. Cautiously she approached, keeping her eyes on the craft. Inside, a figure moved weakly. The human had brown hair, pale skin, and eyes that looked wide with fear and pain. Lyra could tell immediately that he was badly hurt, his leg caught under part of the wreckage. Without a second thought, she stepped closer. Her strength allowed her to lift the metal easily, freeing the human from his trap. He collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain. "Are you alive?" Lyra asked, her voice low but firm. The human's eyes met hers, and for a moment there was silence. Then he nodded weakly. "Yes, I think so." "Thank you." Lyra helped him to his feet, supporting most of his weight. She noticed the burns on his arms and face and the deep bruise forming on his leg. Carefully, she guided him back to her shelter. Along the way, he stumbled and she caught him instinctively, marveling at how fragile he seemed compared to her own immense body. At the shelter, Lyra cleaned his wounds as best as she could, using herbs she had learned to prepare from the forest. The human winced but did not resist, clearly trusting her despite the differences in their size and species. "My name is Ethan," he said softly, his voice hoarse. I didn't think anyone would find me." "I am Lyra," she replied. "You are safe for now. Rest." For the first time in months, Lyra felt a spark of connection. This human did not see her as a monster or a mistake. He did not judge her for being different. He simply existed, vulnerable and alive, and that was enough to start a bond. Over the next few days, Lyra taught Ethan how to move safely across the plains. She showed him which plants were safe to eat, how to avoid predators, and how to navigate by the stars. In return, Ethan shared stories of his own world, of cities that floated in the sky, of machines that could fly faster than any creature on Thalora, of humans who built entire civilizations from nothing. Lyra listened with wonder, realizing that there was more to life than survival and societal judgment. She began to hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a place for her beyond the loneliness. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ethan looked at Lyra thoughtfully. "You're incredible," he said, "not just because of your strength, but because of who you are. You've survived everything and you're still helping me. That's remarkable." Lyra felt warmth in her chest, a sensation she had almost forgotten. She had been admired for her abilities, but no one had ever praised her for simply being herself. The words touched her in a way that went beyond her body or her strength. They acknowledged her spirit. "I never asked to be cast out," she said quietly. "But I will make the life I have a life worth living." Ethan nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. He had seen her struggle, her pain, and her resilience. And in that moment, they both realized that their meeting was more than chance. It was the beginning of something neither had expected, a partnership built not on rules or expectations, but on trust, respect, and the possibility of a new future. As night fell, Lyra stood again on the cliff, gazing at the stars. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel entirely alone. Somewhere out there, across the endless plains, a human who had survived a crash was sleeping safely in her shelter, trusting her to protect him. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start dreaming of something greater than survival, a life filled with hope, companionship, and the possibility of a family she had once thought impossible. The wind howled around her massive frame, but this time, it did not feel like emptiness. It felt like the world itself was alive, watching, waiting, and Lyra, the outcast, was ready to face it, not as a rejected soul, but as a force capable of change, courage, and love. The morning sun rose over the jagged plains, casting golden light across the rocks in the shelter Lyra had built. Ethan stirred, groaning softly as he pushed himself up on one elbow. His leg still hurt from the crash, but the pain was more manageable now. He looked around, taking in the massive figure of Lyra, her silhouette outlined against the rising sun. "Good morning," Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. "You slept well. Your wounds are healing." Ethan managed a weak smile. "Thanks to you, I can't believe how strong you are." "You saved my life, Lyra," Lyra shrugged. "I did what anyone should do. You were in danger." But inside she felt a small warmth. For months she had lived alone, and the isolation had gnawed at her spirit. Seeing this human alive, trusting her, brought a sense of purpose she had not felt in a long time. After breakfast, a mix of foraged fruits and roots, they began the day's routine. Lyra decided it was time to teach Ethan the skills he would need to survive outside the shelter. "Stay close to me," she instructed. "There are predators in the plains. Some are fast, some are strong, but all of them are avoidable if you know their patterns." Ethan nodded, trying to keep up as Lyra moved with surprising speed. Her long strides carried her over rocky paths, through thick undergrowth and across streams that might have taken him hours to cross. He watched in awe, realizing that her size and strength were not limitations, they were her greatest advantages. As they walked, Lyra explained the flora and fauna of Thalora. She pointed out plants that could heal cuts, roots that could be eaten raw, and berries that were poisonous if touched. She taught him how to listen for the subtle sounds of approaching predators and how to track animals for food without disturbing them. "You are patient," Ethan observed, his voice tired but curious. "And careful." I've never met anyone like you. Lyra looked at him, studying his small human features. And I've never met anyone like you. You see things differently. You notice what others would ignore. Their bond began to grow naturally, strengthened by trust and cooperation. For the first time, Lyra felt the presence of companionship. It was strange and unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. She found herself thinking of Ethan not as a burden, but as a partner, someone who shared the weight of survival. As days passed, Ethan's strength and confidence improved. Lyra watched with quiet satisfaction as he learned to move with agility, use tools, and find sustenance. He was a fast learner, his curiosity and intelligence apparent in every decision. One afternoon, while they rested by a stream, Ethan asked, "Lyra, why were you cast out?" "I don't understand." "You're amazing. Why would anyone turn away someone like you?" Lyra's eyes darkened. She hesitated before answering, her voice low. "My people, they value certain things above all else. Strength, skill, intelligence, they admire them. But when it comes to reproduction, they have strict rules. My body is too big, too strong. They said I could never bear children as they expect. So they rejected me. They said I was a mistake." Ethan listened silently, his expression serious. "That's cruel. But it's not true. You are more than your body. You are capable of so much more than they can see." Lyra felt a spark of hope at his words. For the first time, someone was not judging her for what she could not change. Instead, he saw her for who she truly was, brave, capable, and resilient. That evening, as the sky turned a deep purple and stars began to shimmer, Ethan and Lyra spotted movement on a distant ridge. Lyra squinted, recognizing the shapes as figures from her own species. "They've found me," she whispered, tension tightening her shoulders. "They think I am weak because I was exiled. They may try to take you, or me." Ethan looked at her, his resolve clear. "Then we'll stop them together." Lyra nodded, feeling the reassurance of his presence. The next hours were a tense test of skill and strategy. Using the terrain to their advantage, Lyra and Ethan evaded the alien hunters, moving silently through rocky outcrops and thick undergrowth. Lyra's knowledge of the land combined with Ethan's ingenuity allowed them to outsmart the hunters at every turn. During a brief rest, Lyra spoke. "You are clever. Humans think differently. I would have been caught easily if I were alone." Ethan smiled. "And I would have been helpless without you. We make a good team." The partnership between them grew stronger, built not on size or strength but on trust, respect, and mutual reliance. Each day, Lyra found herself looking forward to their conversations, their shared discoveries, and even the quiet moments of silence where no words were needed. One night, under a sky filled with stars, Ethan asked, "Lyra, have you ever wanted a family? I mean, children?" Lyra's gaze turned distant. "I wanted it once, long ago, but my people said it would never happen, that I was unsuitable. I gave up hoping. Survival became enough." Ethan reached out, placing a hand on her massive arm. "You shouldn't have to give up on that. Maybe there's a way. Together we could find one." Her heart, so long hardened by rejection, felt an unfamiliar warmth. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she could be more than just strong, more than just an outcast. She could be a mother. And perhaps with this human it could happen. The following days were filled with work and planning. Lyra began preparing a small hidden garden near the shelter, using fertile soil and water she had carefully collected. Ethan helped, creating simple tools to till the ground and plant seeds. Together they transformed a small patch of harsh land into a place capable of sustaining life. Lyra marveled at the growth, not just of the plants, but of their partnership. Ethan's presence brought a sense of purpose beyond survival. For the first time she felt hope, not just for herself, but for a future she could never have imagined before. One afternoon, while collecting water from a nearby stream, Lyra and Ethan heard distant shouting. Lyra recognized the language of her people, the same words that had once condemned her. They were coming closer. Lyra tensed. "They have followed me again. This time they may try to force me back, or worse." Ethan stood beside her, unafraid. "Then we face them, together." When the alien group arrived, Lyra stepped forward, her massive form blocking Ethan from harm. The aliens, smaller than her but numerous, hesitated, surprised by her strength and confidence. You do not belong here, one of the elders said, echoing the words of months past. Return with us or face consequences. Lyra shook her head. I will not return. I am not a mistake, and I will not let anyone harm the human who trusts me. The standoff lasted tense moments, each side assessing the other. Finally, recognizing that brute force alone would not succeed, Lyra used strategy and the terrain to her advantage. She moved swiftly between rocks, confusing and dividing the group. With Ethan's help, using clever traps and tools, they were able to force the aliens to retreat. After the danger passed, Lyra and Ethan sat together by the stream, exhausted but unharmed. Lyra felt a sense of pride she had never felt before. She had not only protected herself, but also someone she cared about deeply. Ethan looked at her, admiration shining in his eyes. You are incredible, Lyra. Not because of your size or strength, but because of your courage, your heart, and your mind. Lyra smiled, feeling the weight of rejection from her past lift slightly. Thank you, Ethan, for seeing me, for trusting me. It means more than you know. As night fell once again, the two of them settled near the shelter, the stars reflecting in their eyes. Lyra no longer felt the crushing loneliness that had defined her exile. Instead, she felt a connection, a bond that promised safety, friendship, and perhaps even something more. For the first time since her life had been shattered by judgment, Lyra dared to imagine a future where she could be more than an outcast. With Ethan by her side, she began to believe that survival was only the beginning. Together they could face the world, and perhaps even change it. And in the quiet of the night, as the wind whispered through the cliffs, Lyra allowed herself to hope. Hope that she could be more than strong. Hope that she could be loved. Hope that one day she might hold life of her own in her arms. The plains of Thalera stretched endlessly under the pale light of the twin suns. Lyra moved with her usual grace, though now she no longer moved alone. Beside her, Ethan adjusted his pack and kept pace, slower than her but steadily improving. Together they were learning not only to survive, but also to thrive. Days had passed since their last encounter with the alien hunters, and Lyra had grown more confident in their ability to protect themselves. Still, she knew that danger could come at any time. Thalora was unforgiving to the weak, and even the clever could be caught off guard. I've been thinking, Ethan said one morning, his voice calm, yet carrying a hint of excitement. We've survived this long together. Maybe we can do more than just survive. Maybe we can build something. Better. Lyra tilted her head, curious. Better? What do you mean? Life out here doesn't have to be only about avoiding danger, Ethan explained. We could create a home, a real home. A place where we are safe, where we can grow. Maybe even a family. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The thought of a family had always seemed impossible. Her people had rejected her for something she could not change, and she had buried that longing deep inside. Now hearing Ethan speak of hope, it stirred something she thought was lost. I've never imagined it, she admitted softly. But maybe it is possible. The two of them spent the next few days building and expanding the shelter. Lyra's strength allowed her to lift heavy stones and carry large bundles of wood, while Ethan's ingenuity helped design simple structures that were stable and comfortable. They created a water collection system from nearby streams and dug small gardens to grow edible plants. Every task, every small improvement strengthened the bond between them. As they worked, Lyra found herself sharing stories of her past. She told Ethan about her training, her skills, and the world she had lost. She did not hide her sadness, nor did she minimize the rejection she had faced. Ethan listened without judgment, asking questions, offering encouragement, and reminding her that the past did not define her worth. One evening, after a long day of work, Ethan suggested they rest on the cliff overlooking the plains. The wind was gentle, carrying the scents of distant forests and wildflowers. Lyra leaned against a rock, her massive frame relaxed for the first time in weeks. You've taught me so much, Ethan said. I could never have survived without you. But I also feel different. Like I found something I didn't know I was missing. Lyra looked at him, noticing the sincerity in his eyes. I know what you mean. I thought I was alone forever. I didn't think anyone would see me for who I am, not just my size or strength. Ethan reached out, lightly placing his hand on her arm. I see you, Lyra, and I believe we could have something more. Something worth protecting. Her heart warmed at his words. She had spent so long doubting herself, so long believing she was unfit for love or family, But now, beside this human, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe she could be more than an outcast. Maybe she could be a mother and a partner, and someone truly seen for all she was. Over the following days, they continued to explore the land together. Lyra taught Ethan how to climb cliffs, track animals, and identify useful herbs. In return, Ethan showed her simple machines and devices he carried from his ship, inventions that could make life easier and safer. Lyra marveled at his cleverness, and Ethan admired her strength and skill. Their training was interrupted one morning by a sudden storm. Dark clouds rolled over the plains, lightning cracking across the sky. The wind whipped violently, tearing at their shelter and the small trees around them. Lyra instinctively grabbed Ethan, pulling him close to shield him from flying debris. "Hold on," she shouted, her voice nearly drowned out by the storm. She moved with precision, her massive arms keeping them both safe. Even as the storm raged, Lyra felt a sense of calm. She was protecting someone she cared for, someone who trusted her completely. That trust, that connection, was more powerful than any fear. When the storm finally passed, they surveyed the damage. The shelter had been battered, but their preparations had held. Lyra and Ethan worked side by side to repair what was broken. During these moments, Lyra realized something important. Survival alone had never been enough. What mattered most was the bond they shared, the friendship, trust, and growing affection between them. One afternoon, while exploring a nearby valley, Lyra noticed tracks in the soft soil. She crouched, examining them carefully. "These are not from animals," she murmured. "Someone else has been here." Ethan leaned close, studying the tracks. "Do you think it's them? The hunters?" Lyra shook her head. "No. These are new. Different. We should be cautious." They followed the tracks carefully, moving quietly through the valley. Soon they discovered a group of alien traders, small and nimble, moving supplies across the plains. The traders seemed unaware of Lyra and Ethan's presence. Lyra and Ethan decided to observe from a distance. Ethan whispered, "Maybe we could trade with them. Supplies, tools, anything that could help us." Lyra considered it. Trusting others was difficult after her exile, but she also knew that survival could be easier with help. "We must be careful," she said. "If they see weakness, they may try to take advantage." Over the next few days, they approached the traders cautiously, offering assistance in return for supplies. Lyra's strength allowed her to lift heavy loads, while Ethan offered his knowledge and skills. Slowly, they earned the traders' respect, gaining food, tools, and other resources that made life easier. This success gave Lyra a renewed sense of confidence. She began to believe that her size, once considered a flaw, could be a gift. It allowed her to protect, to build, and to survive. More importantly, it allowed her to help someone she cared about, Ethan. As the weeks passed, their partnership deepened. They shared meals, stories, and moments of quiet reflection. Lyra taught Ethan to appreciate the beauty of Thalora, the way the sunlight gleamed on the cliffs, the sound of rivers cutting through the plains, the stars that filled the night sky. Ethan, in turn, taught Lyra to dream of possibilities beyond survival, of creating a home, of building a future, of embracing hope even when the world seemed cruel. One night, under a sky filled with shimmering stars, Ethan spoke softly. "Lyra, I know this is sudden, but I feel like I've known you longer than I have.
I trust you completely, and I
want to be part of your life. Not just here surviving, but more." Lyra's heart raced. She had never imagined a human could care for her in this way, let alone want to share a life with her. She looked at him, seeing sincerity and courage shining in his eyes. "Ethan, I feel the same. I didn't think this was possible. But with you, I feel like anything is possible." They sat together in silence, letting the night wind and the distant sounds of Thalora fill the space between them. For Lyra, this moment marked the beginning of a new chapter, a life where she was not defined by what others said about her, but by the bond she shared with someone who truly saw her. The next morning, Lyra and Ethan began making plans for a future that once seemed impossible. They expanded their shelter further, creating spaces for rest, work, and even a small garden that promised to grow into something sustainable. Lyra began to imagine raising children here, teaching them about the land, survival, and the strength to face any challenge. Ethan's presence gave her courage to consider possibilities she had long abandoned. Together, they practiced survival skills, explored new areas, and dreamed of a life where Lyra could be more than an outcast, where she could be a mother, a partner, and a protector. Their days were not without challenges. Predators still roamed the plains, and the threat of alien hunters was never far. But with each passing day, Lyra and Ethan grew stronger together. They learned to rely on each other, to trust their instincts, and to face danger with courage and strategy. Lyra realized that her size and strength, once seen as flaws, were in fact gifts, tools to protect, to build, and to create a life filled with hope. And with Ethan by her side, she finally allowed herself to dream of a future where she could have everything she had been told was impossible: companionship, love, and family. As night fell once more over the plains of Thalora, Lyra looked out at the stars, her massive frame silhouetted against the sky. Ethan sat beside her, his hand brushing hers, a silent promise of trust and partnership. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt that she was not alone, not just surviving but living, and together they could face whatever the universe might throw at them, hand in hand, hearts united and hope alive. The sun rose slowly over the cliffs, bathing the plains of Thalora in a soft golden light. Lyra and Ethan had been working tirelessly for days, expanding their shelter and tending to their small garden. Life had begun to feel like more than just survival. Each day they grew closer, their trust and bond strengthening with every shared task and quiet conversation. But the world around them had not forgotten Lyra. News of her survival had begun to spread. Carried by travelers, traders, and the occasional alien patrol, whispers reached the ears of the council that had cast her out months ago. Many considered her actions a defiance of their rules, a challenge to the strict laws that dictated who was deemed worthy of life and family. Lyra knew it was only a matter of time before they would try to force her back. She had faced rejection before, but now, with Ethan by her side, she felt something she had never felt as an outcast: hope. And with hope came determination. "We need to be ready," Lyra said as she looked over the plains from the top of the cliff. Her massive form seemed even more imposing in the morning light. "They will not accept that I have chosen my own path." Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Then we prepare. We've learned so much already, and we can handle whatever comes. Together." Lyra smiled slightly. His confidence was infectious, and she found herself believing in their chances more than ever. They began to fortify their shelter, using stones, vines, and tools Ethan had crafted from salvaged parts of his ship. They dug hidden pathways, set traps to warn them of intruders, and mapped the surrounding terrain to find safe routes if they needed to flee. Despite the constant work, there were moments of peace. One evening, as they rested near the garden, Ethan handed Lyra a small carved figure he had made from a piece of wood. It was a tiny representation of a mother and child. "I made this," he said softly. "I thought, maybe one day it could be real for you, for us." Lyra's massive hands held the small figure carefully. Her eyes shimmered with emotions she had rarely allowed herself to feel. I never thought it could happen," she whispered. "But with you, maybe it can." That night they slept with a renewed sense of purpose. Lyra dreamed of a future where she could raise children, teach them about survival, strength, and kindness. For the first time, she did not fear her size, her differences, or the judgment of others. She saw a path forward, a life she could claim for herself. The next morning, as they worked in the garden, a distant noise caught Lyra's attention. She paused, ears twitching, eyes scanning the horizon. Ethan followed her gaze. "They're here," she said quietly. "The council sent hunters. They think they can force me back." Ethan's expression hardened. "Then we show them that strength and courage matter more than rules. We can protect ourselves and our home." As the hunters approached, Lyra and Ethan prepared. The massive alien warriors were skilled and fast, but they had underestimated Lyra's intelligence and determination. She had spent months surviving in the wild, learning to use every rock, every crevice, and every natural advantage to her benefit. When the first group of hunters came within sight, Lyra stepped forward, her massive frame blocking Ethan from view. "You will not harm him," she said, her voice echoing across the plains. "And you will not take me back. I choose my own life." The hunters hesitated, surprised by her size and presence. They had expected fear, weakness, or compliance, but found none. Lyra's stance, her confidence, and the fire in her eyes told them she would not yield. Ethan joined her, holding simple but effective tools he had made to distract and confuse the hunters. Together they used the terrain to their advantage, setting traps and guiding the hunters into positions where their own strength became a liability. Rocks rolled, vines ensnared, and sudden movements forced the hunters to retreat step by step. Even as the battle raged, Lyra's mind remained focused. She protected Ethan, anticipating every move of the attackers and using her size to shield him. Her strength, once seen as a flaw, became the very reason they survived. Finally, after hours of tension, the hunters retreated, realizing they could not overpower Lyra and the human. Exhausted but victorious, Lyra and Ethan stood together surveying the plains. "You were incredible," Ethan said, admiration shining in his eyes. "Not just your strength, your mind, your courage. I can't believe they thought they could take you." Lyra smiled, feeling pride swell in her chest. "They only see what they want. But we see each other, and that is what matters." The victory brought a new sense of confidence. Lyra began to plan for a future that included more than survival. She and Ethan spoke openly about the possibility of creating a family. Using the knowledge Ethan had of human medicine and the resources of Thalora, they began to explore safe ways for Lyra to conceive, a hope that had seemed impossible before. Ethan was patient and caring, ensuring that Lyra never felt rushed or pressured. Together they researched and experimented carefully, combining human ingenuity with Lyra's understanding of her own body and environment. Every success, no matter how small, was a victory that brought them closer together. One evening, as they worked by the light of the setting suns, Lyra spoke softly. "I never imagined this could happen. I thought I would always be alone, but now I see a future where I can have more than survival. I can have life, love, and family." Ethan reached for her hand, holding it gently. "You deserve it, Lyra, more than anyone I've ever met, and I'll be here with you every step of the way." Their bond deepened, not just through shared survival, but through mutual respect, hope, and the promise of a future together. Lyra began to see that her exile, once a mark of shame, had led her to this moment, a life she had chosen for herself, with someone who valued her for all she was. As they prepared for another night under the stars, Lyra felt a strange but welcome sense of peace. The hunters might return and the council might still disapprove, but she was no longer afraid. With Ethan by her side, she could face anything. Her size, her strength, and her intelligence were no longer limitations. They were tools to build the life she wanted. And in that quiet moment, Lyra allowed herself to dream fully. She imagined a child in her arms, teaching them about courage, kindness, and the power of choosing one's own path. She imagined a home filled with laughter, learning, and the warmth of family. And most of all, she imagined a life where she was not defined by the mistakes others thought she had made, but by the love and hope she chose to embrace. The next day, as they continued their preparations, Ethan spoke with a determined tone. "We need to make sure our home is safe for the future. If we want to have a family here, it must be protected, and we must be ready for anything." Lyra nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I agree. We will strengthen the shelter, secure the garden, and continue learning. No one will take our future from us." Together they worked tirelessly, combining their skills and knowledge. They built walls reinforced with stone and wood, created hidden storage for food and water, and set simple but effective warning systems around their home. Every task, no matter how small, was a step toward the life they dreamed of. As night fell, Lyra looked out over the plains once more. The stars shone brightly and the winds whispered softly around her. She felt a sense of determination and hope that had been absent from her life for too long. She was no longer merely surviving, she was creating a life, a future, and a family. Ethan sat beside her, his hand brushing hers, a silent promise of partnership and trust. Lyra felt the warmth of connection, the power of love, and the courage to face any challenge that might come. She knew the council and hunters might return, but she was ready. With Ethan, she could overcome anything. And as the twin moons rose over the cliffs of Thalora, Lyra allowed herself to believe fully in a life she had once thought impossible. A life where she could be a mother, a partner, a protector, and most importantly, a woman who chose her own destiny. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt complete, not because the world had accepted her, but because she had chosen herself, and someone had chosen her in return. Together they were building more than a home, they were building a future. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Lyra and Ethan had settled into a rhythm that balanced work, survival, and hope. Their shelter had become a stronghold, a place of comfort and safety in the wild plains of Thalora. More importantly, it had become a home, a place where trust, partnership, and love thrived. Lyra felt changes within herself that she had only dreamed of. Her body, once a source of shame in the eyes of her people, now carried a promise of life. The human beside her had given her hope, courage, and care. Each day as she felt the gentle signs of growth within her, she understood that the impossible was now real. She could finally become a mother. Ethan noticed the subtle changes first. "Lyra, you're glowing," he said one morning, handing her a basket of harvested fruit. I think our efforts are working. Life is growing inside you." Lyra smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "It feels strange but wonderful. I never imagined this could happen. Not after everything I've been through." Ethan took her hands in his, squeezing them gently. "You deserve this more than anyone I've ever known. And I'll be here every step of the way, just as you've been here for me." With that shared promise, the two of them began preparing for the arrival of the child. They built a special room in the shelter, one that was warm, safe, and filled with comfort. Lyra carefully arranged soft bedding, while Ethan created simple tools to ensure the room was secure and functional. Even in this remote world, they wanted to provide a space filled with love and safety. Lyra continued her training, not out of necessity, but to strengthen herself for the journey ahead. She practiced climbing, moving through the plains, and maintaining her strength, both for herself and for the life she carried. Ethan assisted, guiding her with caution and care, making sure she never pushed too hard, yet encouraging her to remain strong. One evening, under the glow of Thalora's twin moons, Lyra shared a quiet moment with Ethan. "I've never felt this kind of peace before," she admitted softly. "I thought I would always be alone, always an outcast, but now I feel whole, I feel ready." Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her face, smiling. "You are whole, Lyra. Not because the world accepts you, but because you've found someone who sees the truth of who you are. And you've chosen to let yourself hope again." As the months passed, Lyra's strength and spirit grew alongside her body. She continued to teach Ethan about the land, its secrets, and the creatures that roamed it. In return, Ethan shared ideas and inventions that made their life easier and more secure. Together, they faced small challenges, storms, wandering predators, and the ever-present fear of discovery by the Council, but each obstacle only strengthened their bond. One morning, Lyra felt a sudden sharp pain. She gasped, clutching her side, and Ethan immediately rushed to her. "Lyra, what is it?" "It's time," she whispered, her voice both fearful and excited. "The child. It's coming." Ethan's heart raced. He had read about births in human history, but nothing could prepare him for this moment. He helped Lyra move to the prepared room, supporting her carefully. Lyra breathed deeply, focusing on the life growing inside her, while Ethan stayed by her side, offering encouragement, love, and calm guidance. Hours passed, filled with effort, concentration, and care. Lyra's strength amazed Ethan as she endured the pains of labor with determination and focus. She was not only surviving, she was creating life, proving that her body and her spirit were capable of more than anyone had ever believed. Finally, as the first light of dawn crept through the shelter's entrance, a cry filled the room, a small, strong, and healthy life. Lyra's arms, massive yet gentle, held the newborn close. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the child, feeling a love so deep it could not be measured. Ethan knelt beside her, overwhelmed with awe and joy. "Lyra, it's perfect. Both of you." Lyra smiled, exhausted but radiant. "We did it. We made it. Together." The days that followed were filled with wonder, discovery, and deepening love. Lyra and Ethan cared for the child with dedication, teaching it the ways of Thalora, the strength to survive, and the courage to face the world. They shared stories of their own lives, lessons learned, and dreams for the future. Every moment, every shared smile or gesture, strengthened their family bond. Word of their survival and the birth of the child eventually reached the exiled council. Many were shocked. Lyra, once deemed unfit for motherhood, had not only survived but thrived. She had brought new life into the world, defying their judgments and showing the power of determination. Courage and hope. One day, representatives came from the council, not to punish but to witness the truth. They arrived at a distance, observing from afar, unsure how to approach the human and the exiled giantess who had become a mother. Lyra and Ethan, aware of their presence, chose to meet them, not with fear but with confidence. "You see what we said could not happen?" Lyra's voice carried across the plains, strong and unwavering. "I am a mother. I am capable, and I chose this life for myself." The council was silent, their pride and prejudice confronted by undeniable proof. Lyra's child, healthy and strong, was a living testament to courage and resilience. They had no words, only acknowledgement of what she had accomplished. Ethan stepped forward, holding Lyra's hand. "Judgment cannot define potential. Strength, care, and love do. She has shown all of these in abundance." The council slowly retreated, leaving Lyra and her family in peace. The plains of Thalora, once a place of exile and hardship, had become a home where they could live freely and without fear. Lyra, once cast out for her size and perceived weakness, had not only survived but flourished. She was a mother, a protector, and a partner to someone who truly valued her. Months passed, and the family grew stronger together. Lyra taught her child the ways of Thalora, the plants, the animals, and the lessons of survival. Ethan shared knowledge of invention, creativity, and human ingenuity. Their child, born of courage, hope, and love, thrived in this unique world, inheriting the best of both parents. Lyra often reflected on her journey, from rejection and exile to the joy of motherhood. She realized that her body, once seen as a flaw, had carried life and strength. Her spirit, once doubted, had guided her through the harshest challenges. And her heart, once lonely, had found love and partnership with Ethan. Together they built a life full of warmth, safety, and possibility. They no longer feared the judgment of others, for they had proven that courage, resilience, and love were more powerful than any rule or prejudice. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the plains, Lyra held her child close while Ethan sat beside her. They watched the stars, imagining the future that awaited them. Lyra whispered softly, "We did it. Against all odds, we created a family, a life worth living." Ethan smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And this is only the beginning. We have everything we need, each other, our home, and a child to teach and love. Nothing else matters." Lyra nodded, feeling the warmth of family, hope, and love spread through her. The journey had been difficult, filled with danger, prejudice, and doubt. But in the end, she had found her place in the world, not because the universe deemed her worthy, but because she had chosen it for herself and someone had chosen her in return. And so, the exiled giantess, once cast out for her body, lived as a mother, a protector, and a woman who had reclaimed her destiny. She had survived, thrived, and created life against all odds. The plains of Thalora, vast and wild, had become a home where love, courage, and hope would endure for generations to come. Lyra smiled as she looked down at her child, feeling a sense of completion she had never known. "Welcome to the world," she whispered, "my little one. You are the proof that nothing is impossible, and together we will thrive." Ethan placed his hand on hers, both of them watching their child sleep peacefully. The future was wide open, filled with endless possibilities. And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt truly free, strong, loved, and complete. The stars above shone brightly, reflecting the life and hope below. And in that quiet moment, Lyra understood a truth she had long been denied. Strength and love, courage and care, can overcome any obstacle. And from that strength, life blossoms even in the harshest of worlds.